Horror fans, get ready. This is going to be wild. Today we are ranking some of the best Indian horror movies in terms of how much I would recommend them. You know what? Let's just dive into it. But wait, before that, a bit of an intro. Over the past few weeks, or maybe it has been months, yeah, this video is coming in pretty late, but hey, who's counting, right? Anyway, for the better part of the last few months, I have been scouring the interwebs for what might be the best Indian horror movies. And when I say Indian horror movies, I'm looking at everything. I don't care about the language, the budget, the popularity, when or where it was screened. I am looking at everything. I browsed the depths of the internet, asked YouTube, asked Reddit, my own friends, and even my family, and in the process collected enough data to feed my channel for quite some time. So this will be part 1 of the Indian horror movie tier list, and today we'll be looking at around 6 or 7 films for a start. 6 or 7. Some housekeeping. Obviously you and I will differ in what's considered as a horror film. I mean, as far as Indian films are concerned, there are only a few films that are horror in the true sense, with even some of the best in the business being genre hybrid. So I'm gonna keep the definition of what constitutes a horror movie a bit loose. Now, as for the tiers, let's not go for the conventional SABCs or the numeric ratings, because that will not be very exciting now, would it? So here are my tiers: peak, glorious, underrated, overrated, and finally nope. Let me explain. Peak tier is for films that are the pinnacle of Indian horror. These need not necessarily be perfect, but despite their flaws have risen to the top due to its uncompromising commitment to being the best. These are the films that you would recommend even to non-Indians and even non-horror fans as champions of the Indian horror genre. If I were to explain with some non-Indian examples, I would put something like The Wailing and The Thing right up there. Peak tier films are those which are a definite watch for all, but especially fans of the genre. Glorious tier is for films that come close but have issues that keep it from being peak. I would say Long Legs and Noroi the Curse belong right here. The films in this tier are again a must watch for fans of the genre after you have watched the peak ones. Non-horror fans will still appreciate them, but maybe not as much as the peak ones. Underrated is self-explanatory, I'm guessing. It's not glorious enough to have the popularity it deserves, but I personally believe that they deserve more love. These are possibly the hidden gems of the Indian horror genre. You may have heard of some of them, you might not have heard of them. Either way, they deserve more recognition than what they currently have. Lake Mungo and The Empty Man fall into this category in my opinion. I would say this is more of a niche category and can be skipped by non-horror fans unless there are elements of the specific film that you might find interesting. Horror fans should probably watch these films because A, you are not a normie, you are a niche horror film enjoyer, aren't you? And B, this film might be a hidden gem specifically suited to your taste, even if the mainstream might disagree. Lake Mungo, by the way, is one of my all-time favorite films and all of you should watch it. Overrated are the films which are not even as good as the underrated films in my opinion, but somehow always pop up with the conversation involving best Indian horror films for reasons which may be specific to the particular film that I do not necessarily agree with. Get Out is a prime representative of this tier, and we all know it. The liberal film reviewers and their obsession with virtue signaling has been the death of film criticism for quite some time. I would also say the original Exorcist belongs here. Let's be honest, the movie doesn't quite strike the same as it did half a century back. I do respect it as a classic and what it did for the genre, but in 2026, it doesn't exactly live up to the endless praise that it gets now, does it? Meanwhile, films like Alien, The Thing, The Shining, movies from around the same time, they were great that day and they are great even today. The films in this tier are not exactly required viewing for anyone, but they are popular for a reason, and if there are elements of the film that you might find interesting, you should probably watch it regardless of my opinion. And finally, the nope tier. It's for films that you find folks recommended but are straight up ass in my opinion. I would never recommend that you watch these films, at least from a horror film perspective. I'd put the last 3 Saw films over here. Yes, the Saw franchise is not exactly high art, but I do love them for what they are. But these last few films have been an absolute disgrace to a declining franchise that had initially showed a lot of promise. Anyway, that was quite the long preamble. I guess we'll stick to 6 films for part 1 of this tier list in the interest of time. And also, this is my list. I'm just some guy on the internet with an opinion, and I live by my own ideologies and political views, probably different from yours. So let's agree to disagree if you don't find my rankings to match yours, or if I disparage your favorite horror film. That being said, please feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe if you haven't already. Alright, let's stop wasting time. Let's just jump into part 1 of this tier list and see which Indian horror films deserve the place at the top. And as always, no spoilers. Let's begin. Starting with 13B, Fear has a new address. Oh boy, we are gonna start with a hot take, aren't we? 13B was one of the most recommended films from many different sources while I started preparing this list, and was in fact the first movie I watched for creating this tier list in the first place. And my immediate thought after finishing this movie was, I think some of you may have suggested this film while wearing your rosiest tinted glasses. You know what? Let's start with the positives, because this movie definitely has a lot of stuff going for it. Starting with the fact that you can definitely tell that this film is a labor of love. I'll be honest, I don't really bother with Bollywood films much these days, primarily because they feel so fake, superficial and artificial, not just in terms of their content but also in terms of the creative effort that went into their production. Don't get me wrong, they sure do love to burn money to entice a quick dopamine rush from the audience, but the on-screen antics often lack a sense of personality and authenticity, if you catch my drift. Meanwhile, just the opening minutes of 13B have enough creativity oozing from every pore of it to convince you that the filmmakers are truly passionate about what they're producing. The film starts with this really eerie montage of CRT televisions being assembled with the film credits being overlaid, and can I just take a minute to appreciate all the effort that went into the text and its effects and animations. It's just brimming with character and imagination and creativity, and the creativity doesn't quite end there. We are then welcome to the opening scenes of the film, which introduce the lead characters of the film one by one from the perspective of different doors of the home. Oh wait, I think I missed the plot synopsis. So basically 13B tells the story of Manohar and his family who move into the titular apartment 13B and realize slowly that there is something very wrong with their apartment, mostly evident by the fact that the television every day at 1 pm 13 automatically tunes into a TV serial with characters who are basically stand-ins for Manohar's family that predict the family's future at least a few hours from then. Some of it good, but most of it being gruesome and messed up and disturbing. Yeah, a TV show that predicts the future. Yeah, a TV show that shows the future. I challenge modern Bollywood to come up with a film that is this creative. The creativity goes even further. This is one of the most uniquely stylized films on this list and maybe in all of Indian horror media, starting with the color palette. It is constantly evolving based on what's on screen, but it's mostly muted and desaturated for most of the film, communicating this sense of dread and hopelessness. And not in your typical movie desaturation way, it looks almost like a black and white film with just enough colors seeping in. The cinematography and the direction as well does come into being as imaginative as possible whenever the opportunity presents itself. All in all, the technical aspects of the film are simply way ahead of its time, which is kind of ironic considering how the rest of the aspects of the film are doing quite the opposite. And now we get to the negatives. You see, despite its unique setting, imaginative concepts and technical sophistication, the film unfortunately plays out like a mega serial or the soap opera as the kids call it these days, with the writing and the dialogues being melodramatic and especially over the top, bordering on cringe. It feels unnaturally dubbed as well, almost like a parody of Bollywood films, like one of those reels of South Indian films being dubbed on Hindi you'll see on Instagram. You know, like one of those.
तो इसका पार्टी प्लान ऑफ है, लगता है बीवी का खौफ है.
Yeah, one of those. Obviously, I'm exaggerating, but the script and the dialogues are a bit too corny and campy for my taste, but the actors, especially Madhavan, is fully committed to bringing the script to life, so it's kind of funny at times, even if the filmmakers didn't intend it to be. Now, for any other film, this would be a positive for its pure entertainment value, but for 13B, this is an extreme negative considering how seriously the movie wants itself to be taken. This is not helped by the fact that outside of the unintentional humor, the writing is barely engaging, with the film feeling dry, bloated, and padded out. In fact, I would say it would have been better if some scenes played out without any dialogue or some scenes had been entirely cut out altogether. Speaking of which, the next issue is with the pacing. It literally took me around 3 sittings over the course of a few days to get through this film. And it's not just the fact that it is a very long film, clocking in at around 2.5 hours or more, but it's more to do with the fact that while there are a lot of interesting things happening on screen, they are not exactly paced very well, especially in the first half. And it's not just about the script and the writing, the actual story as well, despite being very original and full of potential and creativity, is very amateurish when it comes to finally providing answers, and it kind of abruptly resolves itself in the most unsatisfying manner imaginable. I mean, no spoilers, but Chekhov's gun, more like Chekhov's bazooka, I would say. It's almost like the film is traveling between two chronological extremes, with the technical side of the film being way ahead of its time, while the thematic and narrative elements of the film still stuck in the good old days of Bollywood masala filmmaking. Did I also mention that there are 2 spicy item number songs for absolutely no reason? Hey, I'm not complaining, but it's exceptionally out of place, especially the one playing with the closing credits. It's just so weird and not in a very good way. You know what's more weird? The film was simultaneously made in 2 languages, with Madhavan as the lead in both of them, but the rest of the cast being replaced to produce 13B, the Hindi film, and Yavarum Nalum, the Tamil film. Yeah, plus the writer-director Vikram Kumar being a South Indian filmmaker might just explain all the weird writing going on in the film, or maybe it's just a matter of the film being a product of its time, you never know. Regardless, I guess the film must have been groundbreaking at the time, considering all the things it brought to the table that were quite ahead for Bollywood cinema. But as it stands now in 2025, the film feels partially dated, and no amount of rose-tinted nostalgia will change the fact that this film in 2025 is overrated as hell. So let me just put it right there in the overrated tier. Don't be mad at me, as I mentioned earlier, The Exorcist, which some consider the best horror film of all time, also belongs there in my opinion. So, good company at least. Now, moving on from a film that is somewhat dated to a film that is so timeless that its remakes made even a quarter of a century later can't hold a candle to it. Manichitrathazhu. See, the problem with making any list involving Indian horror films is this. For a very long time, there were not many pure horror films made in India as such. Except for the rare gems, which we'll be covering, don't you worry about that. Most of the Indian horror films were hybrids of some sort, with horror coming in only as an afterthought in some cases. See, the movie-going audiences back then were largely still composed of families looking for a fun, yet safe and comfy time, and the horror films of that time had to cater to them primarily. But horror by its nature has to push boundaries to get the intended emotional reaction. However, this need to cater to family audiences combined with the censorship and audience expectations at the time meant that horror films had to work within these limits. But as they say, restrictions breed creativity, and so we have Manichitrathazhu, even 33 years later after its release, considered to be one of the best Malayalam films ever made, not just in terms of horror. Manichitrathazhu tells the tale of Nakulan and his wife Ganga, a modern couple who, against the wishes of their elders, decide to take a vacation at their supposedly haunted ancestral home in rural Kerala, where they seemingly release a vengeful spirit which endangers the lives of everyone they ever cared about. While there is nothing unique or groundbreaking about the premise of the film now or even 33 years ago, it is the way the film is executed that makes it one of the greats. You see, like I mentioned earlier, the film plays along with the whole family-friendly, safe and cozy vibe for most of the film, and like most stereotypical Indian films of the time, it's heavy on drama. It has entire musical sequences, it has a lot of suspense and mystery elements, and like most of the films of its time, it's chock full of comedy. In fact, this film has a lot of humor, with the filmmakers even masking the initial horror sequences with humor to lull the audience into this false sense of safety and security, till around the 40-minute mark of the film, where the horror slowly but surely starts creeping in. And the horror too is not something gratuitous or scary by any means, like most modern horror films. Like I said, in keeping with the audience expectations and censorship at the time, the horror is rooted deep in Indian mythology and is more classy and mature and comes from the atmosphere and mood of the film, and the filmmakers expertly play with it, frequently injecting some humor when things get too heavy and pulling back in on the horror vibes as the movie approaches its ending. In addition to all this horror, the mystery, the thrills and the humor, the film also has room for executing its themes brilliantly as well. Traditionalism versus modernity, science versus religion, and so on, all of which are portrayed on screen in a way that makes the audience think. Very much unlike how most modern films try to push an agenda. There is so much more to the horror of the film as well, but I'll just stop it right now to keep it spoiler free for the two people who are not familiar with the film or its many remakes. Now, all of this is down to a masterfully written script by Madhu Mattam, which perfectly balances mystery, suspense, horror, drama, and of course, horror. Unlike something like 13B that I mentioned earlier, the writing here is to the point, with no wasted lines, and is delivered via realistic, natural dialogue, which is not afraid to get dramatic at times, but never gets to the point of being needlessly campy or even cringe. The script is consistently engaging and compelling, whether you can understand Malayalam or if you're using subs as well, and that is mostly thanks to the filmmaker Fasil. Yeah, his dad. No, really, nepotism is good when it works. Anyway, Fasil has done an excellent job in bringing the script to life, and the movie, while it doesn't break the mold of traditional filmmaking as I mentioned, the film does have enough dynamism to look, sound and feel engaging even today. And the performances, how could I forget? The stars, Suresh Gopi, yes, Mr. Palayadimon, don't try to play the fool with me Nigesh for the non-Kerala, as Nakul and the husband, Mohanlal, our number one megastar as psychiatrist who's assigned to science the entire thing out, Tilagan, Nedmudu Venu, and a whole lot of Malayalam OGs in various supporting roles, but most importantly, Shobana in her national film winning role as the leading lady Ganga. You know what, forget the whole horror tier list thing. This movie is a must watch just for her performance alone. She gives it her all, and her acting is subtle and loud based on what the scene demands of her, and she is simply a joy to witness on screen. We can sit here and argue whether the remakes of Manichitrathazhu are better than the original or not, and you will be wrong by the way, but what can never be argued is the fact that Shobana is the best in playing that character in any of these films. Did I also mention mention how good the dance sequences are. You know what? This section of the tier list is getting too long, so let me just conclude by saying yes, Manichitrathazhu may be 33 years old, and yes, it may be a product of a time where horror needed to be muzzled, but through sheer mastery of craft and every aspect of filmmaking operating at its highest level, Manichitrathazhu has simply become one of the best Indian horror films ever made. And no, the film is not scary per se, and very much unlike modern horror films, it doesn't rely on shock value, jump scares or violence or gore to get the horror across, so it can be easily recommended to anyone even remotely interested in Indian horror media. Plus, it portrays themes and ideas which are extremely unique to Indian horror and is shot and cut like a typical Indian film in the best possible way. And for all these reasons, Manichitrathazhu is the quintessential Indian horror film, peak tier, no doubt about it. Now, before you accuse me of being one of those typical cringe, oh wow, Malayali films are the best content creators, let me just bring in one of the worst films I had the misfortune of watching last year, and that is Sumathi Valavu. Let me be very upfront here. The film is complete ass, and that's not just because the film is a total shit show on its own right, but because the actual horror elements of the film with which it was marketed in the first place, despite being very interesting, are thrown to the wayside almost halfway through the film to make way for an exceptionally boring and generic romance story. It is one of the most egregious examples of bait and switch tactics I have seen in quite some time, and I reserve a strong hatred for this film just because of this fact. Like I said, this film has a very interesting unique selling point of this bend in the road at the exit of a town which is haunted by an entity called Sumathi, hence Sumathi Valavu, Sumathi Bend. So the entire town locks it down and refuses to exit or even go near it after sundown. And don't get me wrong, the film does have a few compelling horror sequences leveraging this concept, especially one towards the interval involving a woman who has to go into labor around sundown, forcing the leads to cross the bend with the woman, but these are very few and far between. Instead, the far less interesting romance side plot of our lead characters becomes the main plot by the second half, after the film meanders aimlessly for most of its runtime, trying to decide on what it's actually about, with the horror of the film getting benched to make way for the romance plot, and it only pops up back again during the last 15 or 20 minutes or so to mysteriously aid our protagonist for absolutely no reason, and then the film ends with the most bullshit cliffhanger imaginable. I am still slightly confused about the ending, but I guess the script writers were even more confused about the entire film, I'm guessing. See, contrasting with something like Manichitrathazhu, which was juggling multiple tones throughout the film, quite masterfully so, with this lead even breaking into a song at some point during the emotional low point of the film, it never felt out of place or distracting, as the nature of the song is very consistent with the tone of the film at that point. Meanwhile, the lead in Sumathi Valavu breaks into the most out of place song and dance number for absolutely no reason in the least thematically appropriate point at the end of the film. It had me laughing out loud in the theater. I mean, tonally inconsistent would be quite the understatement at this point. Even more inconsistent is the nature of the horror entity and its goals. See, ambiguity in horror is great, but the film treats its horror entity as some kind of cheap, do-it-all nonsensical jump scare machine that can take whatever form it like, one or many, and do whatever the plot demands from it, taking away from the allure of the horror. You know what, even talking about this film pisses me off, and that is enough reason for me to put it squarely in the nope tier, not just as a horror film, but as a film in general. So avoid this film like the plague at all costs. Now, moving on from a film that I wish could be relegated to the lost annals of movie history to the film that I sincerely believe more people should know about, Darna Mana Hai. Darna Mana Hai is messy, it's uneven, at times it's even kind of unhinged, and yet it's one of the most creative horror films Bollywood has ever produced. At the very least, it's one of the most weirdest entries on this list, and I mean that as a genuine compliment. It's a 2003 Hindi language anthology horror film consisting of 6 unconnected short films and one overarching container film that hold them all together. Unlike most films discussed so far, it does not take itself all that too seriously, and more than just being a traditional horror film, it acts as a playground for weird and wacky horror concepts and ideas to be explored in a fun and campy setting. Oh, and then there is the fact that it's an anthology film, similar to the VHS franchise for those in the know. But unlike the VHS and other anthology franchises, Darna Mana Hai actually has some serious acting talent involved. I was genuinely surprised seeing so many big Bollywood stars in such short roles, and I'm itching to tell you who they are, but it's best to experience it for yourself, so no spoilers except for whatever was shown in the trailers anyway. Here's how the movie plays out. 7 friends, while on a long road trip at night, are brought to halt by a flat tire in the middle of a forested road. They are unable to reach out for help, but notice a small, well-lit clearing in the middle middle of the forest where they decide to gather and wait for help. And while they do, they decide to tell each other spooky stories to pass the time, and these stories play out of those anthology horror shots. Meanwhile, simultaneously, a killer stalks them and takes them out one by one as the movie progresses. This is quite a quirky premise, and the movie gets points for originality alone. And like I said earlier, weird would be the word that I would use to describe the entire film, and in a good way. For starters, the film opens with this very well produced erotic montage featuring the lead actresses in skin tight clothing dancing over the opening credits. I mean, what the hell? As an online film critic, the expectation from me is to tell you that I'm offended and whine about female objectification and whatnot, but I'm not one of those librando film critics, so screw that. More films should be doing this. The film then begins proper, and it feels a bit clunky and amateurish for a while, despite the entertaining weird factor. Not exactly the best first impression. You see, the problem with this film and anthology films like it is the inconsistency that one must deal with, since each of the horror shots are of very different quality when it comes to all aspects of filmmaking. And Darna Mana Hai is unfortunately a prime example of this, with maybe one or two great horror shots, two or three okay ones, and at least one being extremely mid. And apart from these, the overarching story of the friends being stalked by the killer might be one of the worst of the bunch, and when viewed in isolation, it feels like amateur hour, saved only by the fact that the lead actress is exceptionally hot. That being said, the film is saved by the fact that there is so much creativity and originality to these shots, even if those are not executed to perfection. And there is so much variety as well, with the shots not just aiming for traditional horror, but also the strange, the uncanny, and the downright absurd as well. Minor spoiler, but this will explain what the film is going for. In one of the shots, the lead gains the ability to pause time for those who can see and hear him, and as you might expect, he slowly starts to abuse his power for evil as the shot progresses, and the story then concludes in one of the most hilarious and unexpected ways that you can never predict. And this film is simply worth the watch for this particular shot alone. And like I said, most of these shots are brought to life by veterans of Bollywood, so even if the concept or the execution is not up to your liking, the performances will definitely keep you entertained. Also helps the fact that this film is extremely technically competent as well, with some really well shot nighttime sequences that make you feel the darkness closing in around you, plus some exceptional production design, practical and visual effects. Now, to conclude, this is a difficult one to rank on the tier list, as I had mixed feelings watching the film, considering how uneven it was regardless of its originality and creativity. Maybe this unevenness and inconsistency is what is holding it back from being one of the greats or even the good ones that you see recommended all the time. But I would still say this: if you have the time and the patience, this film is a definite watch if you are a fan of the horror, especially its weird side. So with all these things considered, I'm gonna put this film straight in the underrated category. Sure, the film is not unpopular by any means, but I feel like it deserves more attention than your typical mainstream horror film, despite its inconsistencies and flaws, thanks purely due to how weird and wacky it gets. And now from a very underrated film to a very popular film as far as South India is concerned anyway, Demonte Colony. Gentle reminder to subscribe if you haven't done already, by the way. If I had to describe Demonte Colony in a single word, it would be fun. Don't get me wrong, the movie doesn't immediately present itself that way, with a somewhat sloppy opening and a slightly dull and cliche first quarter, but stick with it for a bit more time and rejoice as it turns into an unpredictable, thrilling and exceptionally compelling film. So the premise of Demonte Colony is this: four friends at the low points of their respective lives get drunk and visit the supposedly haunted Demonte Colony, the mansion belonging to a British officer with a rather tragic and disturbing past, but they get more than what they bargained for when the spirits of the mansion are awoken from their slumber. And that's what I thought the movie was going to be about, a typical haunted mansion rom, but then this haunted mansion part of the film is over rather quickly, and it's what happens after they return to their homes that make this film truly amazing. See, similar to Darna Mana Hai that we discussed before this, the film does not take itself too seriously, and not in a haha jokes kind of manner, but in a more self-aware horror movie kind of manner, with it being a mishmash of the best ideas that the genre could offer, and throwing all types of horror movie tropes at the audience while dabbling in all kinds of horror movie genres as well. You have aspects of psychological horror, comedy horror, action horror, you have jump scares, a short period piece drama horror sequence, you have a twist that will leave you with existential dread, there is a ton of violence, blood and gore, and there is an equal amount of tension and anxiety as well, along with a whole lot of claustrophobia, along with all other types of spooky shit throughout the film, and so much more. The film also liberally borrows from the genre's best concepts as well. You have Final Destination-esque Rube Goldberg death sequences, violent poltergeists, CGI British ghosts, Ouija board sequences out of nowhere, and even the future predicting television straight out of 13B, which are all executed brilliantly within the confines of a very small room within which the protagonists find themselves trapped in, like some kind of pocket dimension. Now, listening to all of this, you might think that this film is some kind of crammed clusterfuck of a film, but you'd be dead wrong. The filmmakers somehow pull it off, and they have achieved it by making sure that each and every horror idea or concept or trope is executed only once and when the story demands it, and then moving on after that. This not only adds to the variety but also makes the film very fast paced. In fact, I finished the movie in just one sitting without even a water break. Another thing I will praise the film are the visuals of it, especially the practical and visual effects as well, which are executed at a very high level of fidelity and scale, especially considering the budget of this film. Now, if I had any negatives for this film, it would be the fact that this film does feel a bit amateur, almost like a first time filmmaker's attempt at mainstream cinema production, which actually would make a lot of sense, as I just found out as I'm typing this that this is the filmmaker R. Ajay Gnanamuthu's debut feature, and wow, what a debut it has been. You know what? I had such a good time with this film despite its slow start and somewhat of an amateurish vibe. I'm gonna put it straight in the glorious tier. It is a must watch for fans of the genre and for anyone looking for a fun time if you have the patience to sit through its rather cliche opening bit. And for the last film in volume 1 of this tier list, let's go back to the Malayalam film industry and talk about Irae. Irae, like the previously discussed Demonte Colony, is a really fun time. However, unlike Demonte Colony, which was self-aware, unserious and a bit amateur, Irae is much more self-serious in its approach, with an exceptionally refined and focused filmmaking style that totally immerses the audience into the horrors of the film. It is your typical haunted house horror film that slowly turns into an investigation thriller with horror elements, where the horror sequences are metically executed to absolute perfection, with each sequence being better than the previous one, crescendoing in one particular sequence close to the halfway mark, being one of the most exceptionally brutal horror sequences in all of Indian cinema. Unfortunately, that particular sequence sets a very high bar that the rest of the film is unable to climb, and the second half investigative elements are not that great either, making the rest of the film feel not as compelling as the first half. Fortunately, the final few minutes of the movie pick back up in the horror department, and the movie luckily ends in a bang and not in a whimper. You know what? I've talked enough for one part of this video, so let me just put Irae in the glorious tier where it deserves to be on and move on. Why so fast? Well, that's because if you feel the need to hear me rant more about Irae, I have already made a 7-minute review for it, which you can watch right here. I'll put the link here. Yeah, that one. So, I'll see you in volume 2 of the tier listing with more films to be ranked, hopefully more than 6 next time around. Anyway, till next time, this is the Indian Movie Critic. Remember to subscribe, like and share.